Let's get straight to it. You've got easy personnel problems and you've got hard personnel problems. And the easy personnel problems, you already know how to solve. You're going to use your usual leadership strategies like telling them what you need from them, creating an action plan, and hearing them say, "Sure thing, boss," as they go and do the task. We're not talking about those problems because you don't need any help on those problems. We're here to talk about the hard personnel problems. Whether it's one person on your team, multiple people on your team, or the whole culture, whether it's your boss or your colleague, you're dealing with problems that can't be solved the easy way, because if they could, you would have already. Here's the crux of all tough personnel problems that you are facing, whether up, down, or laterally. People are operating self-defensively. That is the most important point. So let's remember this. People are operating self-defensively. And when people operate self-defensively, their actions land sour. It sounds off, it tastes off, it feels off, it lands sour. And I know that you've seen this before. Consider the person who comes to you asking constant questions about every little thing. We all know that there's nothing wrong with asking questions, but the way that they're doing it, somehow the way that they're asking questions, that's what sounds off. In all my work and all my research, I've found that when things feel sour like that, it's because people are operating out of self-protection than out of interest in the company goal. That's bad for team dynamics and it's bad for business. And that's why psychological safety is such a buzzword, because when people feel safe in the workplace, they're not busy watching their own back, but they can devote their entire attention to doing excellent work. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before we start talking about solutions, let's talk about the why. Why don't people feel safe at work? The way someone was raised, the way they were previously managed, traumas they've had that they've never processed, all of these things shape how we show up in the workplace and shape how we perceive things like feedback, structure, and leadership. Something as small as a tone being off, or receiving a deadline, or even getting public praise can end up feeling like it's a threat, even when it was never intended as one. That's what we call being triggered, and it happens to all of us. Here is a really common example, the phrase, "we need to talk." For so many of us, the first thought is, "Oh no, what did I do wrong?" Because we've had this life experience where when somebody says we need to talk, that means we're in trouble. Now, our brain is constantly reprogramming itself to avoid the bad thing. And so when it's noticed in association, somebody says we need to talk, we get in trouble. The next time that cue happens, the brain says, oh, the bad thing's about to happen, so we need to start operating self-defensively. Here's what the brain does. It goes into an adrenal mode. You're familiar with a fight, flight. Some others are fawn and freeze. When we are in panic because we assume that bad things going to happen, our brain diverts energy from our thinking brain into those adrenal responses. That's why it's so hard to think straight when you're feeling that panic. And when that panic takes over, the next action is usually self-protective, usually going to land sour. So our typical leadership strategies work well when people are operating out of that sense of safety, but they don't work well when people are operating out of what I call the threat mode. Here's what happens instead. You use normal leadership strategies and they don't work. And because you're a good leader, you don't get too angry, you just take a deep breath and you think, I'm going to try this again. And you do, but as you continue to try again and change isn't happening, you do start to get a little bit frustrated. Whereas initially you were supportive and encouraging, after you've tried again and again and again, you start to get frustrated and irritable. So you decide, I need to be direct. I need to be firm. And then you go to do this. Meanwhile, your employee has been operating under threat this entire time. And you walk in the door to be firm. And the threat levels have increased. The sense of threat increases. The actions that they make are even more self-protective. That sense of sourness it accelerates. And now your patience is gone. This is unacceptable. You might even start moving into threat yourself, wondering, are they challenging my authority? Am I really in charge here? Am I losing control of my team? And as you move into threat and they move into threat, each of the sourness that happens as a result of our actions only escalates this cycle. We're caught in the threat loop. Now, I don't know where you are in the threat loop today. I don't know if you are way at the beginning where you are starting to feel like, I've tried multiple times and it's not working, I think I need to be firm. Or if you are fully in this place where you feel like your leadership is being threatened and you are frustrated and done entirely with this person. But wherever you are in this cycle, you can flip the script. It starts with realizing that the threat mode is a part of the story. And then the next thing that we need to figure out is, what is the trigger? That's the obstacle, and that's what we need to solve for. But why are we even doing this? When leaders recognize that the threat mode is playing a role in their workplace, when they have the skills to be able to identify obstacles and overcome those so that their team members can get back to thriving in the workplace, this builds psychological safety. Psychological safety is directly linked with employee engagement, because when people are self-protective, they're focused on themselves. But when people feel safe, they focus on company goals, and that's the engagement that we want to see. According to Gallup's State of the Workplace report in 2024, we see that companies who are in the top quartile of employee engagement have 51% lower employee turnover, 18% higher employee productivity, and 23% higher profitability than companies in the bottom quartile of employee engagement. So this is a huge impact on the bottom line, but more than that, what I see is the impact on stress levels. When leaders come to me, they are longing for less stress in their lives. And when we can use these skills of psychological safety, you're gonna see that your team starts stepping up. They are solving problems without making those your problems. They're receiving feedback without making that your problem. And they are becoming a high performance team so that you have way less stress that you're taking home on the weekends, in the evening, and even on vacation with you. Because finally, at last, you're gonna have a high performance team. Okay, first the bad news, then the good news. Bad news is basically everyone on your team has experienced trauma. In my own research, I found that 80% of the workforce had experienced workplace trauma specifically. And of those, 50% of people reported that they had been triggered by their workplace trauma in the workplace. When we consider all of the other types of trauma, we quickly recognize that everyone has experienced something. And when I ask my clients to take inventory of the people on their team, they are shocked to think through and realize how many people are actually operating in threat mode on their teams. This is a problem that you will face in your leadership. And so let me teach you the skills that are going to make all the difference. Because this is the keystone of excellent leadership that is not included in leadership trainings. I teach what I call behavioral etiology. And this means decoding why people do what they do, especially when it seems irritating, irrational, or exhausting. This tool of behavioral etiology is applicable when you're working with people who have trauma history. It's also true when you're working cross-culturally to think about, where are people coming from out of a different cultural background. Really, it's applicable for any time you are working with somebody who isn't doing what you would expect for them to do. This behavioral etiology is a game changer. When we have the ability to decode the why, we are going to become more empathetic. We are going to be able to help people feel heard and supported in the workplace. This is going to defuse conflict, it's going to build psychological safety, and it is going to strengthen your team, all while solving the problem that you don't want to be dealing with in the first place. And it's not about becoming a therapist and healing them of all of their trauma. It's about how to lead people when trauma is a part of the story. And that's exactly what the personnel problem playbook introduced you to. We were looking at 3 different kinds of personnel problems. The first one is the person who gets very reactive. I like to call this reactive rimming. And what we see is that they are in a fight response, in that adrenal response. The second one is somebody who just smiles and nods and then doesn't do what you've asked them to do. I like to call this A-OK Alex, where it seems A-OK until nothing happens after that. This person is in a freeze response. The third one was uncertain Sam, who's continuously coming back asking questions which he should already know the answer to. This is the fawn response. The personnel problems that we are seeing are people who are in a triggered response, acting out of that adrenal space. And so what we want to do is realize they're in threat mode and then come up with these strategies and tools to be able to move them from that threat mode into psychological safety in the workplace so they can stop doing the thing that's landing sour and start thriving in their job. In order to achieve that, I then teach communication skills that are based on sociolinguistics and a trauma-informed approach. We are going to recognize where they're coming from. We're going to meet them with a wealth of compassion and support for that. And we are still going to uphold our expectation for them. What we're going to do is help them navigate a course between where they are now and the expectation that we have for them. And we're going to circumnavigate all of the obstacles, all of the triggers, all of the barriers that are going to hold them back. And when we do this together and they feel that support from their leadership helping them in that, they are very quickly going to be able to take off. Oftentimes, the part where you feel like you're slamming your head into a wall is where they are facing an obstacle that we are oblivious to. But in the communication skills section, I teach how to have those conversations to figure out what those obstacles are so that we can plan around them. All of this is with the goal of being supportive and holding people accountable at the same time. Next, I teach about cultural transformation. Yes, these are really helpful tools for one person, and one person and one person and one person makes the team. And so how do we take these conversations and this change that we're seeing in our one-on-one sessions and snowballing that to see a cultural transformation that actually sticks? So step 1 is what we covered in this very short training. It is awareness of what the threat mode is and the fact that it is playing a role in this story. The next step is understanding your specific situation. How is the person that you are thinking about right now engaged in threat mode in the situation that you're dealing with right now? And how do you strategize how to overcome that? And that's why I offer the personnel problem consults to help you identify or develop a plan to identify what is going on with your direct report. So if you have already scheduled your personnel problem consult, then to prepare for that call, please take some time to write out a few examples of how your direct report has done something that's landed a bit sour so that you'll be able to share those with me on the call. If you have not already scheduled your free consult, you'll find a link to do that below. I hold space on my calendar to be able to do 4 of these free sessions each week, so please grab one while they're still available. And to all of you, I look forward to seeing you soon. Until then,